The research vessel Harmony's Edge drifted silently through the dark void of space, its hull scarred by unknown weapons fire. Inside the cramped emergency shelter, 12 beings from different worlds huddled together in terror. The air recyclers hummed weakly, and the lights flickered with each passing hour. Dr. Hannah Park pressed her face against the small viewport, watching the alien creatures that swarmed outside their protective barrier. The young human scientist had joined this expedition to study ancient ruins on what they thought was an empty planet. Now those same ruins had awakened something that should have stayed buried forever. "The distress beacon is still broadcasting," whispered Kathai, a blue-skinned Veltar engineer whose 3 eyes darted nervously between the door and the communication panel. "But the council ships are still 2 days away." "We don't have 2 days." The creatures outside looked like giant insects mixed with nightmares. They had emerged from deep caverns beneath the ruins, pouring out in endless waves once the research team had accidentally triggered some kind of ancient mechanism. The beings moved with terrible purpose, their chittering voices creating a sound that made everyone's skin crawl. Captain Yilmer of the research vessel had died in the first attack, along with 3 other crew members. They had been outside, collecting samples when the ground suddenly erupted with claws and teeth. The survivors had barely made it to the emergency shelter before the creatures overran their landing site. "Look at them," Dr. Hannah Park said quietly, pointing at the viewport. "They're not just attacking randomly. They're organized. They're learning our defenses." The creatures had been testing the shelter's barriers for hours. Each time they found a weak spot, more of them would focus their attacks there. The energy shields that protected the small building were designed to last for days. But under this constant assault, they were failing much faster than expected. Zerilyn, a graceful, ethereal with silver skin and large black eyes, floated near the communication station. Her people rarely showed emotion, but even she seemed frightened. "The Council rescue ships carry minimal weapons," she said in her musical voice. 3 light cruisers against this. They will not be enough." Through the viewport, they could see thousands of the creatures moving in the distance. The beings had stripped the nearby forest bare, consuming everything organic they could find. Smoke rose from multiple points on the horizon, where they had set fires to drive out more prey. "They're reproducing," Dr. Hannah Park realized with growing horror. "Look at those mounds they're building. Those aren't just nests, they're nurseries. In a few days, there will be 10 times as many of them." The communication panel suddenly crackled. To life, a voice speaking in broken galactic standard came through the static. "Research team. This is Council Flotilla 7. We've received your distress signal. Help is coming. ... Hold your position." Relief flooded through the group, but it was short-lived. The signal was weak and filled with interference. More importantly, they all knew that 3 council ships would not be enough to fight through the swarm of creatures that now covered the planet's surface. "We need to tell them about the hive," Kathai said, reaching for the communication controls. "I need to know what they're flying into." But before he could send a message, the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds. Later, bathing everything in red light, the shelter's computer system began speaking in a calm, automated voice. "Warning. Primary power systems offline. Shield generators operating at 30% capacity. Estimated time to complete shield failure, 14 hours. Dr. Hannah Park felt her heart sink. 14 hours was not enough time for the council ships to reach them. Even if the rescue fleet left immediately and traveled at maximum speed, they would arrive to find nothing but empty ruins and scattered bones. Outside, the creatures seemed to sense the weakening of the barriers. Their attacks became more frenzied, and the shelter began to shake under the impact of their claws. The sound was like hail, mixed with fingernails on metal, constant and terrifying. "There has to be something we can do," Dr. Hannah Park said, though she knew how hopeless their situation had become. She was barely 26 years old, a scientist who had never been in any kind of combat. The others were researchers and civilians. 2, not soldiers. The ethereal Zerilyn drifted closer to the viewport, her large eyes reflecting the red emergency lighting. "In my culture, we have a saying," she said softly. "When the darkness comes, light a candle. When the candle fails, light a fire. When the fire dies, call for the sun. What does that mean? Asked Dr. Hannah Park. It means, Zarilyn replied, that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Your people are new to our galaxy, Dr. Park. Perhaps they do not follow the same rules as the rest of us. Unknown to the trapped researchers, their distress signal had already been intercepted by more than just the Council flotilla. Deep in space, on a heavily armed human vessel, Admiral Jiho Kim was reading the emergency transmission with growing anger. One of his people was trapped and terrified, surrounded by hostile aliens on a death world. The human response would not follow galactic diplomatic protocols. The human fleet materialized from hyperspace like angry gods stepping into reality. 16 massive warships appeared in perfect formation, their dark holes bristling with weapons that could crack planets. The sight made every sensor operator within 3 star systems freeze at their stations. Captain Velhai of the Council Rescue Flotilla had been preparing for a routine evacuation mission. His 3 light cruisers carried medical supplies, emergency equipment, and enough firepower to handle pirates or equipment failures. He had not expected to encounter a human battle group that looked ready to invade an entire sector. Council vessels. This is Admiral Jiho Kim of the Terran Defense Force. The transmission crackled through space with barely controlled fury. We are assuming operational command of this rescue mission. Transmit all available data on the situation. Immediately, Captain Velhai's blue skin grew pale as he stared at the tactical display. The largest human ship was 3 times the size of his flagship, and its weapon signatures were unlike anything in the Council database. The humans had been part of galactic society for less than 50 years, but their military technology seemed designed by beings who understood violence in ways that terrified peaceful species. Admiral Kim, Captain Velhai replied carefully, "We appreciate your assistance, but this is a standard rescue operation. Our forces should be sufficient to extract the research team." Negative. Admiral Kim's voice cut through the static like a blade. "We have a human citizen in that shelter. Dr. Hannah Park is under the protection of the Terran Defense Force. This is no longer a Council operation." For sleek human frigates broke away from the main fleet, moving with predatory grace toward the planet. These were stealth ships, designed to slip past enemy sensors and gather intelligence. But as Captain Velhai watched them accelerate, he realized they were moving far faster than any ship he had ever seen. Commander Minseo Lee stood on the bridge of the lead frigate, studying the sensor readings with professional interest. Ship, the Shadow Strike, had been built specifically for reconnaissance missions in hostile territory. The humans had learned their military lessons in the fires of their own world wars. And those lessons had made them very good at killing things efficiently. "Ma'am," reported Lieutenant Daho Park, the ship's sensor operator, "I'm reading massive biological activity on the planet's surface. These aren't pirates or equipment raiders. This is something much worse." The tactical display showed the planet's surface crawling with movement. Thousands of heat signatures moved in organized patterns across the landscape, stripping away vegetation and building strange structures. The research team's shelter appeared as a tiny dot of light surrounded by an ocean of hostile contacts. "Mia visual," Commander Lee ordered, the main screen filled with images that made even the hardened human crew feel sick. The creatures were like insects crossed with nightmares, each one the size of a small vehicle. They moved with terrible intelligence, working together to tear apart the planet's ecosystem. Smoke rose from burning forests as they consumed everything organic they could find. "Dear God," whispered the ship's communications officer. "There are millions of them." Commander Lee studied the images with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. She had fought in the border wars, where human colonies had been attacked by alien raiders. She knew what it looked like when something threatened humanities. "Children, send this data to Admiral Kim immediately," she ordered, "and prepare a full tactical analysis. I want to know everything about these creatures' capabilities, weaknesses, and behavioral patterns." Back on the flagship Retribution, Admiral Kim received the reconnaissance data with growing anger. The tactical briefing painted a picture of an ecosystem-consuming hive mind that had been dormant for thousands of years. The research team had accidentally awakened something that would spread across the galaxy like a plague if it wasn't stopped. Immediately, Sir reported his chief tactical officer. The Council flotilla is requesting permission to attempt a diplomatic contact with the hostile species. Admiral Kim turned to stare at the officer as if he had suggested surrendering to the enemy. Diplomatic contact, Lieutenant? Those things are trying to eat our people. The Council believes that all conflicts can be resolved through communication. And understanding, the officer explained uncomfortably. The Council has never fought a war for survival, Admiral Kim replied coldly. They've never had to make the choice between their children's lives and their philosophical principles. We have. The human admiral activated the fleet-wide communication system, hit his voice reaching every ship in the battle group. All vessels, this is Admiral Kim. We have a human citizen trapped on that planet, surrounded by hostile aliens that want to kill her. We also have a threat to galactic security that needs to be eliminated before it can spread to other worlds. He paused, looking at the tactical display that showed the swarm of creatures covering the planet's surface like a disease. This is not a rescue mission anymore. This is pest control. We're going to save our people, and then we're going to make sure these things never threaten anyone else again. The response from the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Weapon systems, powered up with the distinctive whine of charging capacitors. Launch bays opened to reveal fighters and assault craft ready for deployment. The humans were preparing for total war, not a simple evacuation. Captain Velhai watched the preparations with growing dread. His species had evolved from prey animals, and every instinct screamed at him to flee from the predators that had just revealed their true nature. The human battle group moved into attack formation with mechanical precision that made Captain Velhai's blood run cold. Each ship took its assigned position without hesitation, their movements coordinated like parts of a single deadly machine. The massive dreadnought Retribution positioned itself directly above the research shelter, while 12 destroyers spread out in a protective ring around the planet. Inside the emergency shelter, Dr. Hannah Park felt the building shake as something large crashed against the outer walls. Creatures had been attacking for hours, and the energy shields were failing faster with each assault. The red emergency lights cast terrifying shadows as alien claws scraped against the reinforced windows. Shield power down to 15%, announced the shelter's computer in its maddeningly calm voice. Estimated time to failure. For hours, 37 minutes. Kethai, the blue-skinned engineer, pressed his 3 eyes against the communication panel. The Council ships are still 18 hours away, he whispered. We're not going to make it. Dr. Hannah Park tried to stay calm, but fear was eating at her like acid. She was a scientist, not a soldier. She studied ancient civilizations and dead languages, not combat tactics and survival techniques. The creatures outside seemed to sense her terror, their chittering voices growing louder and more excited. High above the planet, Admiral Jiho Kim stood on the bridge of the Retribution, studying the tactical display with cold fury. The sensor readings showed exactly what his reconnaissance team had reported. An ecosystem consuming hive mind that would strip the galaxy bare if allowed to. Spread, sir, reported Commander Humwu, the ship's weapons officer. All batteries are charged and ready. Targeting solutions locked on the primary hive concentrations. Admiral Kim nodded grimly. The human military had learned its lessons in the brutal wars of Earth's history. When something threatened their people, they didn't negotiate or try to understand it. He destroyed it completely and asked questions later. Begin orbital bombardment, he ordered. Pattern Delta 7. Maximum precision. I want those creatures eliminated without harming our people. The first kinetic strike hit the planet's surface with the force of a small nuclear weapon. A tungsten rod accelerated to incredible speed by magnetic launchers punched through the atmosphere and vaporized a square kilometer of hostile creatures in a brilliant flash of light and heat. The creatures' chittering voices rose to a screech of rage and fear. They had never encountered anything like this before. For millions of years, they had been the ultimate predators on their world, consuming everything in their path without resistance. Now death was raining from the sky with surgical precision. More strikes followed, each one eliminating another cluster of the alien hive. The humans had calculated their firepower carefully, using just enough force to destroy the creatures while leaving the surrounding environment intact. It was a display of military precision that made the council observers feel sick with fear in the shelter. Dr. Hannah Park watched through the viewport as brilliant flashes lit up the horizon. The creatures outside suddenly stopped their attack on the building and began fleeing in all directions, their organized behavior dissolving into panic. "What's happening?" asked Saralyn, the silver-skinned ethereal, whose large black eyes reflected the distant explosions. "Someone's fighting them," Dr. Hannah Park realized with growing hope. "Someone with big guns." The orbital bombardment continued. For 30 minutes, each strike precisely placed to break up the hive's command structure and eliminate their breeding grounds. But Admiral Kim knew that kinetic weapons alone wouldn't be enough. The creatures were too numerous and too well adapted to their environment. "Launch the fighters," he ordered. "Sweep and burn protocol. I want every square meter of this planet sterilized." 200 atmospheric fighters launched from the assault carriers, their engines screaming as they dove toward the planet's surface. These weren't the elegant, graceful craft that other species use for exploration and transport. These were weapons designed by a species that had perfected the art of killing from the air. The fighters swept across the landscape in perfect formation, their incendiary weapons turning forests into walls of flame. They moved like angry wasps, striking fast and hard before dancing away from return fire. The creatures tried to fight back, but their primitive weapons couldn't reach targets moving at supersonic speeds. Lieutenant Subaltwan watched the fighter strike from his position aboard the assault ship Iron Hammer. His 200 Marines were already suited up and ready for deployment, their weapons checked and rechecked. These were veterans of humanity's colonial wars, soldiers who had learned to fight in the harshest environments imaginable, Sir reported. Sergeant Minho Lee, his squad leader, the fighters have cleared a landing zone around the research shelter. Enemy forces in the area are neutralized or retreating. Colonel Wan nodded, activating his helmet's communication system to address his troops. "Listen up, Marines. We have 12 civilians trapped down there, including one of our own. Dr. Hannah Park is a human citizen under our protection. We're going to get her out, along with everyone else." He paused, looking at the faces of his soldiers through their helmet visors. "These aliens made a mistake when they threatened our people. We're going to make sure they understand exactly how big a mistake that was." The drop pods launched from the assault ships like bullets fired from heaven. They're armored, hulls glowing red-hot as they punched through the atmosphere at terminal velocity. The drop pods hit the planet's surface like meteors, each one carrying 5 heavily armed human Marines. The impact craters they left behind were still smoking when the armored soldiers emerged, their weapons sweeping the area for any remaining threats. The air smelled of burning vegetation and alien blood, a mixture that made even the hardened veterans wrinkle their noses. "Lieutenant." Colonel Taiwan stepped out of his pod and immediately assessed the battlefield. The orbital bombardment had done its job well. Scattered across the landscape were the remains of thousands of alien creatures, their chitinous bodies broken and burned by the precise strikes from space. But he could see movement in the distance. Where survivors were regrouping, Squads 1 through 4 establish a perimeter around the research shelter, he ordered through his helmet radio. Squads 5 through 8 sweep the area for hostiles. Nobody gets within a kilometer of our people. The Marines moved with deadly efficiency, their powered armor allowing them to cover ground quickly while maintaining perfect communication with each other. They had trained for this exact scenario dozens of times, practicing the rescue of civilians from hostile alien territory inside the emergency shelter. Dr. Hannah Park pressed her face against the small viewport, watching the human soldiers advance. Through the smoke and debris, she had never seen anything like it. The Marines moved like ghosts, appearing and disappearing behind cover, while their weapons eliminated any creature that dared to show itself. "Are those really humans?" whispered Kathai, his 3 blue eyes wide with amazement. "They move like predators." "They are predators," Dr. Hannah Park replied quietly. "We all are. Most of us just forgot how to hunt," Shelter's computer announced. That the energy shields had finally failed completely, but it no longer mattered. The creatures that had been attacking the building for hours were either dead or fleeing into the deeper parts of the planet. The sounds of battle were moving away as the Marines pushed the aliens back. A heavy knock on the shelter's main door made everyone jump. Then a voice called out in perfect Korean, "Dr. Park, this is Lieutenant Colonel Tae, one of the Terran Defense Force. We're here to get you out." Dr. Hannah Park felt tears streaming down her face as she rushed to unlock the door. When it opened, she found herself looking up at a figure in advanced combat armor, his helmet retracted to show a scarred face and kind eyes. "You came for us," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "We always come for our people," Colonel Wan replied gently. "Always." The evacuation took much longer than expected, but not because of enemy resistance. The human forces had eliminated the immediate threat so thoroughly that they could take their time ensuring everyone's safety. Medical teams checked each of the rescued researchers, while engineers examined the alien ruins to understand what had awakened the creatures. Captain Velhai of the Council Flotilla finally arrived at the planet just as the humans were finishing their cleanup operations. His 3 ships felt tiny and insignificant compared to the massive human battle group that dominated the space around the world. "Admiral Kim," he transmitted nervously, "we have arrived to assist with the rescue operation. The rescue is complete." Admiral Kim replied curtly, "We're now conducting sterilization protocols to ensure this threat doesn't spread to other worlds." Captain Velhai watched in growing horror as the human ships continued their bombardment of the planet's surface. They weren't just eliminating the remaining creatures, they were systematically destroying every trace of the alien hive burning out caves and underground tunnels with specialized weapons. "Admiral, surely this level of destruction isn't necessary," he protested. "Perhaps we could study these creatures, learn to communicate with them." Captain Admiral Kim's voice carried a warning tone. These creatures consumed everything organic on this planet in less than 24 hours. They were preparing to spread to other worlds. There will be no communication, no study, no second chances. The human admiral invited Captain Velhai aboard the Retribution for a formal debriefing. The council officer found himself in a ready room that somehow managed to feel both military and comfortable, with maps of human conflicts covering the walls alongside commendations from various alien species. Your response was comprehensive. Captain Velhai observed carefully, accepting a cup of the bitter human drink called coffee. "Our response was appropriate," Admiral Kim replied, settling into his chair. "We identified a threat to galactic security and eliminated it completely. But the scale of your deployment, 16 major warships for a simple rescue operation." Admiral Kim set down his cup and fixed the alien captain with a steady gaze. "Captain, let me explain something about human military thinking. We don't measure our response by the size of the immediate threat. We measure it by the value of what we're protecting and the potential consequences of failure." He gestured to a wall display, showing the rescued research team in the medical bay. Dr. Hannah Park was visible, being treated for stress and minor injuries, but otherwise healthy. That young woman represents the future of interspecies cooperation. Her research could benefit every civilization in the galaxy. The others with her are equally valuable. But surely a smaller force would have been sufficient. Admiral Kim's voice carried decades of military experience. What if we had sent only 3 ships and lost them to the hive? What if we had underestimated the threat and arrived to find nothing but bones and empty buildings? In human warfare, overwhelming force applied immediately is more merciful than prolonged conflict with uncertain outcomes. Captain Velhai's species had never developed such aggressive military doctrine, but he was beginning to understand its terrible logic. The report that Captain Velhai filed with the Galactic Council changed everything. For 3 days, the council chambers on the central world of Nexus Prime buzzed with heated discussions as representatives from dozens of species tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The humans had not simply rescued their people. They had eliminated an entire invasive species with such thoroughness that no trace remained. Counselor Zethai of the ethereal delegation floated before the assembly, her silver skin shimmering with concern. The humans deployed 16 warships to rescue 12 people, she announced to the gathered representatives. Their response was beyond anything in our military protocols. It was excessive, declared Counselor Morton of the peaceful Veltar species, his blue skin flushed with indignation. They could have attempted communication with the creatures, perhaps found a diplomatic solution. But other voices in the chamber disagreed. Counselor Kresha of the Zephyrian Republic had read the full tactical analysis. The creatures consumed an entire ecosystem in 24 hours, she said, her feathers ruffling with worry. They were preparing to spread to other worlds. The humans prevented a galactic catastrophe. Within 2 weeks of the incident, formal requests began arriving. At Terra Command, these weren't polite inquiries about possible assistance or diplomatic notes requesting consultation. They were desperate pleas for immediate military intervention from species facing threats couldn't handle alone. The first request came from the Moran Collective. Its mining colonies on the edge of Council space were being overrun by savage raiders. The pirates had advanced weapons and showed no interest in negotiation, destroying entire settlements and enslaving the survivors. Admiral Jiho Kim, a promoted to fleet admiral, read the request with interest. They're offering us full access to their rare mineral deposits in exchange for our protection, he told his staff during the morning briefing. It's a significant departure from standard council protocol, observed Captain Ari Choi, his new chief of staff. They're essentially asking us to become their military protectors, and we're going to accept, Admiral Kim decided. But we do this our way with our rules. The human response to the Moran crisis became a template for future operations. 3. Battle groups deployed to the threatened colonies eliminated the pirate threat completely and established permanent patrol stations to prevent future attacks. The operation took 6 days and resulted in 0 civilian casualties. Dr. Hannah Park returned to her research 6 months after her rescue, but everything had changed. Her archaeological team now included a full company of human marines, advanced defensive equipment, and orbital support from a destroyer stationed in the system. She felt guilty about the massive protection detail until she made her first major discovery. The ancient ruins she had been studying contained technology that revolutionized faster-than-light communication. Her research led to the development of quantum entanglement communicators that allowed instant contact across galactic distances. Every species in the Council benefited from her work.
Oh.
But none of them forgot that it had only been possible because humans were willing to fight for her life. The phrase, human guarantee, is entering our diplomatic language, reported Counselor Velhai during a council session 3 months later. When humans promise to protect something, other species take that promise very seriously. The transformation wasn't just diplomatic, it was cultural. Young beings from peaceful species began studying human military history, trying to understand how a single world had produced such effective warriors. Human military academies started accepting alien students, though the training was brutal enough that most dropped out within weeks. Admiral Kim found himself in command of something unprecedented, the Galactic Response Force, a joint human council. Military organization designed to handle threats too dangerous for normal diplomatic solutions. His first act was to establish rapid deployment protocols that could put overwhelming force anywhere in council space within 72 hours. We're not trying to become the galaxy's police force, he explained to a gathering of council representatives. We're offering to be its immune system. When something threatens the peaceful species of this galaxy, we'll eliminate that threat quickly and completely. The proof came 6 months later when an ancient AI awakened on a dead world and began consuming nearby star systems to fuel its expansion. The Council's initial response was to send a diplomatic mission to establish communication. The humans sent a battle fleet that turned the AI and its entire infrastructure into radioactive dust within 3 days, Dr. Hannah Park. Now, the galaxy's leading expert on ancient technologies stood before the Council to present her latest findings. Her work had led to breakthroughs in energy storage, medical technology, space propulsion that would benefit civilization for centuries. The question isn't whether humanity's military approach is excessive, she told the assembled representatives. The question is whether we can afford to live in a galaxy without that protection. Behind her, holographic displays showed peaceful worlds where families raised their children without fear, where scientists pursued knowledge without worrying, about pirates or ancient horrors awakening from the dark. Trade flowed freely between systems protected by human patrol fleets, and exploration missions ventured into dangerous regions with confidence. The Deathworld species had found their place in galactic civilization, not as curious newcomers or junior partners, but as the ultimate guarantors of security. When peaceful species needed protection from the darkness between the stars, they no longer hoped and prayed. They called the humans.